Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Hey CTO. This season 3 we are talking with tech communities in Portugal, and today we actually have the honor of talking with Portuguese women in tech. To do that, we have Inês and Silva and Margarida Trigo, and we also have Sara Gonçalves as usual to talk about diversity, inclusion, equity in tech, especially focus on Portugal landscape. Both of you, Inês and Margarida, thank you so much for being here. And I think that for people that are watching us right now, it would be great if you could do a small intro just for people to understand, who you are, and so we can take the show forward. Who would like to start?
I can go ahead. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and share the work that we have been doing at Portuguese Women in Tech. So I'm one of the founders of Portuguese Women in Tech. Over the past few years, I have been, basically, since I left college, I have been very active in the Portuguese tech scene, supporting entrepreneurs, first with a pre-accelerator, then working with acceleration programs, with incubators, but really trying to support this very nascent entrepreneurship scene that was in 2010-11. And it's been a very interesting ride since then. More recently, I have been working, exploring decentralized science, trying to understand how Web3 tools can help us make better science. That's my full-time job. And on the side, of course, I'm one of the founders of Portuguese Women in Tech.
How about you, Margarida?
Hey, hi. So thank you so much for the invitation. I'm an electronic engineer. Actually, I'm working as a product manager right now, but this is the curiosity of technology. So you can shift and just go to wherever you want to go. And I have been doing this kind of thing. So when I identify myself more as a role or a set of skills, I just jump ahead and try to see if I match the role or not. Concerning the gender issues, since I was one of two females in my generation of electronics engineers of the University of Minho, I decided to, as a curious person, I decided to start researching the topic, and I joined IEEE, the affinity group inside of IEEE, Women in Engineering. And since then, I've been a consumer and contributor to communities related to the topic.
Very well.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And now that we're talking about, PT Women in Tech, I think, me and Sara, we have a good idea of what, the community stands for, the importance, why it was born. But I don't know, Inês, if you could kind of give a nice overview for the ones that are watching us.
Yeah, sure. I think the story of Portuguese Women in Tech starts actually before we started. Back in 2010-11, I became very curious to understand why, whenever I would go to a tech entrepreneurship event, I would just see a couple of women. It was always the same. I was there, and Silva was there, and a few others were there, but were just a few. And then Vânia Gonçalves, she created the Geek Girl Dinners Portugal, that then became the Portuguese Geekettes. No, sorry, the Geek Girls Portugal. And I was I was active in the events. I ended up going to London for the 5th anniversary of the London Geek Girl Dinners. Then I lived in Zurich. And I created the Zurich Girl Geek Dinners.
Wow.
And then, so basically, I was always very active because it was something that I could not understand why I just saw so few women. And in 2016, we were together with Liliana, we were looking at the Portuguese landscape in terms of women in tech. And what we saw was there was not a lot of recognition for the women that was very active in the Portuguese tech scene, but we didn't know about them. So our initial idea with Portuguese Women in Tech was just to create a website where we will tell the story of women in the Portuguese tech scene, who they are, how they end up there, what they were doing, what was their day about. So just provide some kind of visibility, tell their story, and basically inspire other women that might want to pursue a career in technology with these stories. So we start by doing that, but we soon realized that we needed to do more, and we needed to do more on two levels. on one hand, we realized like, okay, we have a lot of different initiatives going on, mainly like meetups, but we wanted to do things that would bring this discussion further. Basically, take this discussion away or outside of the group that was already aware of the importance of having more women in technology, and basically take it further to other people that were not necessarily aware, were not interested in the topic, and so that's why we end up like launching the Portuguese Women in Tech Awards that give help us reach an audience that otherwise we wouldn't reach. We realized that we also wanted to support women that were about to enter the job market. Some of them are like leaving college, and so this is going to be their first job opportunity or job experience. Some others are like already have like 10 or 15 years of experience in another field. They went through a reskilling program and decided to join the tech, basically the tech scene. And so we decided, for example, in that case, to launch the Portuguese Women in Tech mentorship program. But we also realized that, and sometimes I was being invited to go to schools, and two things that I saw. So one was like, whenever I asked like boys and girls if they wanted to work in technology, for the girls, the answer was no. For the boys, they would say yes, but they would say yes for like basically the wrong reasons. It was like because they thought that the life of someone working technology was the life of a gamer, and that's what they wanted to do. And the second thing was like when I asked them, boys and girls, like what does a person do in technology? They had no idea. So they have like no idea whatsoever of like what actually meant to work in technology. And I soon realized that we are asking these kids to make decisions about their lives with very, very little information. Because it's true that they know about the teacher, the doctor, the fireman, because like these are people that are professions that we deal with every day or almost every day. But with a tech person, unless you have a cousin or older brother that actually is pursuing a career in technology, it's actually very hard for you to really have a good understanding of what actually means to work in technology, what roles can we play. And even with our mentorship program, we are talking about women that are already like 23, 24. And when we ask them like, so what kind of role are you going to do in technology? Sometimes, or in a tech company, sometimes not even them knew what kind of roles they could play in a tech company. So that's why we also launched, for example, the Future Portuguese Women in Tech initiative, really to show like women that are working in different fields and what they are doing, how they end up there. And our goal is to really to bust some myths. For example, another myth that they have is like, for you to pursue a career in technology, by 10 years old, you need to already know how to program. So there's so many myths and things that don't make sense, and we know that don't make sense. But somehow these kids in schools still think that they are true. So our goal is like we are mythbusters. So really trying to help kids in schools to really understand that this is not like some complex or like some really opaque thing. This is like it's very clear, is easy to understand as long as you know and you meet people that have gone through that path. So basically, this is us with basically a double mission, supporting women that are already working technology, making sure that this conversation goes further than just like a small group of women, and then making sure that the kids in schools make decisions with information. Of course, I don't think that everyone should pursue a career in technology. I just think that right now, the information that the kid has to make important decisions with their lives is not enough, and we need to do better there.
So interesting.
It's very curious that you touch in some points that I could totally relate with, because even when I was in the school, when I was like a child still, even my teacher told me you should not pursue that because you don't know how to program and you never touch anything on that in your life. And this is a teacher, so it's surreal. But it's curious to see that I pursued these also probably because my father was also on these areas, so I could see what it looks like. So it's curious that you mentioned that, because yeah, I think it totally makes sense. And now I also would like to hear from Margarida, what was the impact that you felt that this community had on you, like a consumer, and that also as a contributor, to also see this whole community of women around you.
Well, I actually was recalling a study I read that 66% of women that ends up pursuing a career in technology had a familiar, close familiar that was working in engineering or in technology. So that's exactly the part of role modeling and representation that we should care about and that we should promote. And that's exactly what Portuguese Women in Tech is doing so well with the awards, for instance, where you can just get to know some women that never had maybe in their life visibility, and their colleagues had a chance to, like just nominate them and so on. And that has a real impact in the lives of women and also in the life of girls that are actually trying to reach out to one of these women to get to some information regarding the careers they can pursue. And actually, I have a lot of cases where women and female young women reach out to me and they just want to, they have some questions to do to me, like, okay, so you went to university, but you were just maybe 1, 2, 3 girls in there. What do you felt there in that time and so on? Did you felt any type of discrimination? And actually, I did not feel it at the time, and so on. So they just have curiosity to know about things like this, So it's really important, I believe, the work Inês and Liliana and all the community of the Portuguese women in tech do.
No, for sure. And one thing that I'm really amazed, from what we were just hearing is that, and we were actually going to ask this, is how early can we start talking? We should start talking about diversity. And it's so interesting that I think now that, after hearing, that Portuguese Women in Tech really goes to schools and to start, talking about, the importance of technology in people's lives and so on. And it's actually people, not just women, right? Because that we know today, we know there is a huge focus on towards boys. It's that, if we think just about professionals, I think that definitely a meetup or, a community can definitely foster a lot the sense of belonging. And for instance, in terms of diversity, the belonging is crucial, right? Because not just about kind of, about the diversity, but definitely people feel welcome, right? Because diversity just for the sake of diversity will never work. But it's even more interesting understanding that indeed to increase the numbers, to increase this diversity, or we go straight to the fountain, right? We go to the youth and say, look, this is not just for boys, like just because you're a woman or just because you prefer X, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be great at math. You're not going to enjoy a coding degree, and so that work, to me, it's amazing. I think it's super smart doing something like that for sure.
I'd like to just add something because I think so. In the last year, we did 2 things that I think are important. One was we were able to work with the Direção-Geral de Educação, and we did a webinar with teachers from all around the country. And our goal there was to really show like these things that we are talking about, the needs, what kind of roles that you can actually play in a tech company. So really open up a little bit their horizons to see like what actually means to work in technology in 2022 and 23. Because I think a lot of the times, as I was saying before, they don't have necessarily a good idea of what actually means to work in technology now. The second thing we did actually this year, late last year, was we also did a webinar with students from all around the country, boys and girls. And what we did was not to talk about let's talk about diversity in tech. That was not the focus. Our focus was let's talk about technology, what actually means for you to work in technology. And the focus here, what I did was to interview a Portuguese Women in Tech community member, Filipa Castro, on her work. So she actually has a bioengineering background. She works as a data science and an ML engineer. So, and we were talking, basically our goal was to show these kids how awesome it is to work in technology. What I did was to go and I used DALL-E and ChatGPT from OpenAI to show these technology things, really show that this can be magical. And in my 1 hour discussion, I never touched upon diversity. But what I did do was to show them women that work in technology. So I showed them Ada Lovelace, because like she was the first person to actually create a algorithm. I showed them the women that were behind the ENIAC, so the first digital computer that existed, and these were the women that were programming this computer. So what I did show was like, and that's I think the opposite that usually happens in schools. Like we just show the simple history without going a little bit further. And what I tried to do was, okay, let's show that like without any mention of like diversity and inclusion, without anything like about, without necessarily telling like, oh, you as a woman, you should go to technology. What we did was like, let's show that women are part of technology already, and they have a role to play, and they have been playing that role since the very beginning. And I think that's an important message, because like I don't think that anyone feels inspired by someone that said like, you should go to technology because you are a woman. That's not at all the thing. What we are saying is like, technology is an area that can provide you an amazing opportunity, a growth opportunity, an opportunity to work in a fantastic or do fantastic job, work with people from all around the world, build stuff, innovate. And this is the exciting thing about technology. And this might be for you. And for example, you were mentioning about math, for example. Portugal is a country from all OECD countries with more women studying STEM, but women usually in Portugal study science, not necessarily technology. We just want to change that because of the opportunity that technology means for them, but always with a very positive way of looking at it. Not like, you should go to technology because you are a woman. No. You should go to technology because all these opportunities that you might have. And if you don't, it's okay. But at least now you know what actually can mean to work in technology.
Getting more informed. Absolutely.
Yeah. And would you say that the ultimate goal of the communities like yours, the P2 Women in Tech, would be to no longer be necessary these type of communities? So, and how far are we to reach that point that we no longer need to talk about, to focus on these topics?
Yeah, I think that's the dream, right? So I usually say like in 10 years, I definitely don't want to be here talking about the same thing.
Oh God, yeah.
So hopefully that won't happen. But I also know that things take time, and that's why we need to start very early with this like inspiration with kids, and really also giving tools and knowledge to the teachers and parents that can basically play an important role in influencing the decision, making sure that women are more like seen even in the media, right? So if our soap operas have women that work in technology in them, maybe they can inspire the next generations, right? So I think like there's a lot of things that need to be done from a media standpoint, from a school standpoint, from an education, family standpoint, that need to happen over the next years. But I think it will take time. I unfortunately won't be as fast as we like. And something that's very interesting is like there was a time in terms of percentage-wise where we had more women studying technology than we have now. Over the past few years, actually, the numbers increased a little bit. But there was a time where, in terms percentage-wise, there were more. I remember. So we have done a lot of events, and sometimes we have actually like female professors from the university, from FIOP, from Instituto Superior Técnico, and others. And they always mention like 30 years ago, they had more female students than they have now. And everyone feels surprised, but it's not that surprising because there was a time where programming was for women and hardware was for men. And then, of course, like software became more important, and then more men start working on it. But you're like a lot of people that were like developing programming were coming from a math background where a lot of women were. So I think like it's important to see like things are changing. Not always. I don't think that they always change in the direction that we expect. Right now, things are improving. And something that I'm seeing that is very interesting is the fact that a lot of like reskilling programs have actually more women than men. And the reason is like women go through like careers in other areas, and then they choose to do a 6-month, 1-year reskilling program to enter the like a tech job. And we are seeing a lot of that. But I think this will take time.
And it's interesting that we're talking about, taking time, and we hope that we are not here in like 10 years time talking about the same sort of topic. And there is one thing that definitely so there are different points of view. That is, how can we speed up things? How can we hack the increase of diversity and definitely, kind of make our ecosystem more interesting. One of the things that I'm actually a firm believer of that, although it's definitely arguable, that is the positive discrimination. We are talking about, it can be quotas, it can be percentages. We can, try to pay more or focus more on hiring, with a diversity mindset, and all those sort of things. I'm a firm believer of that. And although some people usually say, oh, but that's positive discrimination, that doesn't make sense, everything should be, fair and equal. But actually, I really don't tend to share that opinion, because I think that if we just allow nature to, to take its own sort of course, and sure, investing in schools and this and that, I'm just going to say that maybe like in 50 years, we definitely can have, some interesting numbers, but probably we won't get there still, right? Because we're talking about generations. That's it, right? Like you're talking about the school. So it's a generational thing. And so I think that, anything that we can use, from a hacking standpoint, I think it's super valid, because truth be told, like, I think that, the ED&I that we're talking about should be, way more advanced than it is today. And so, Inês, Margarida, I would love to take your take on how do you see, positive discrimination and other tools to really speed things up.
Yeah, I think like I don't like the word positive discrimination. I think like sometimes it's better to call it affirmative action. Is like, okay, so what do we want it to happen, and how can we make it happen?
Okay.
I also don't think like I don't think that the problem right now is like, women are not being hired in the workplace because of discrimination, so we should like do positive discrimination. That's not happening. What's happening, like, we don't have enough women to be hired because like not enough women are actually going to schools. So the second thing that happens, like, men and women are different in the way that they approach the workplace. A very good example: women only apply to a job if they fulfill 100% of the requirements. Men apply to a job if they fulfill, I think it's like 40 to 50% of the requirements.
Indeed.
Which means that something very clear is that so a lot of the times I see companies trying to hire unicorns. Of course, like, they say they're like, this is the ideal candidate. But for a woman, what they see is like, this is what I have to apply to this job. For a man, they say like, okay, this is like some of the things that I need to have. So let's apply. And this happens because like the way that we are raised, the way that society works, but that has a huge impact. I remember talking with the CTO of a big tech company in the UK, and she was telling me that there was this job that they like a job posting that they had no one applying, not men or women. And she said like to the person that was taking care of that, like, please take out everything that we don't need. So what, like, look at the job role and take out whatever like we don't need, because like we are asking for things that probably won't be necessary.
Yeah, like nice to haves. Yeah.
So then they published the job posting, and then they had like a lot of applications, actually more from women than men. And they end up hiring more people that they thought was possible because of just that action. So this is not a discrimination. This is not positive discrimination. This is just like, let's see what kind of like techniques or what can we do to actually make sure that we attract men and women, and we are able to understand like men and women work differently in some aspects, and we can do that. So for me, as I was saying, like, this is not this is not definitely positive discrimination. We are also not talking about quotas. No company has a quota for women, software engineers. Like they might have quotas for women on boards, but that's a different thing. But not for this. So I think like what we need and what we are trying to do at Portuguese Women in Tech is like, how can we make sure that we do actions that later on can lead to really more women in this field, and then more women being successful in this field. But yeah, whenever I talk with companies, I never tell them, or we even discuss that, like, we should focus on hiring more women. The goal is not necessarily that. It's like, or the goal is to hire more women, but but never living or having double standards in terms of the way
Oh,
we
of course.
hire.
For
Never,
sure.
never that.
Oh, that of course. I couldn't agree more. Margarida, anything that you'd like to add?
Yes, so actually, just to complement, previous to the pandemic, the time the Economic Forum estimated to achieve the gender parity was 100 years. And after the pandemic, or at least in the middle, 2020, it increased to 114 years. So we have a lot of work to do. And this type of things that Inês is mentioning are very important to and sometimes we just have to do a little bit of critical thinking, right? It's easier to companies to say we cannot hire any women because they are not available, instead of just thinking, okay, let's see our recruitment process and let's just check if we can adjust something to reach out to more people.
And if we look at Portugal and we try to compare with other countries, I don't know, but regarding diversity, how do you think we are evolving? And so PT Women in Tech was created or founded in 2016. How is being the progression? And do you believe, and Margarida now mentioned with the pandemic, do you believe that this remote work and everyone works from any place they want is also affecting this diversity topic? What's your opinion on this?
I'm actually working fully remote, or at least in a flexible method. And I had the chance to have a lot of female workers which background is not from tech or engineering and so on, but they are working now in technology. And it's very peculiar because they always say to me, oh, we are so privileged to have this type of things and to have this type of salaries and so on. So for me, the pandemic brought us, at least in the Portuguese ecosystem, brought us this opportunity to have at least the chance to have a more balanced life between work and personal things and family and so on. So I believe this is an extra point for women to come and work in technology.
But going back to your question, Sarah, I think the last time that I look at the numbers, I think Portugal had like 14.4% of the professionals working in IT were women. This is a number that is below the European average. So that gives us like already some comparison with other European countries. But I do believe that where we actually see the biggest difference, for example, sometimes I'm invited to speak in events in the UK or in Germany. What I see is like the level of discussion, our level of discussion is not there yet.
Okay.
So I feel like I think we are still playing catch up. So we are still trying to understand like how to be more diverse, and without sometimes forgetting the inclusion part. That's actually, I think, more important than diversity. So we are still trying to understand what to do, and we are very much copying and replicating some of the things that other countries are doing. But I think that's normal. It's a normal process, but I think we are getting there for sure. Like I remember when we started Portuguese Women in Tech in 2016, like there were almost no discussion outside of a small number of people about this topic. Now that's not the case, right? So now people are talking, companies are much more aware and much more interested in understanding what's happening and how can they make a difference here. But still, I think like the level of discussion is still, we are still learning, and I think it's completely normal. But I think with time we'll get there. But I think it's going to take us a little bit longer because of that. I think the fact that right now, as Margarida was mentioned, like women also, like women in Portugal are also working abroad, and I think like there's like a lot of a more like exchange between different countries and different cultures, and I think that's important for us to also learn from others. So I think like I hopefully, especially in the workplace, we'll see an acceleration in terms of these discussions in the coming years. yeah, but that's what I'm seeing.
It's interesting that we were talking about the inclusion piece. I think that if we take a look to Portugal, I think that, you know, from a DNA search standpoint, I think that we are pretty welcoming, which I think that kind of helps, you know, especially if you think about, you know, digital nomads and other people, you know, other people that definitely, you know, became more relevant with COVID and the remote work that we just spoke about to establish themselves in Portugal. And truth be told, I think that we even have this advantage that is, you know, regardless of, you know, of gender, religion, race. I think that at least I'm biased, obviously, but I really believe that Portugal is a very nice place to live and feel like they belong, right? Like, I think that we are very welcoming. And for instance, and truth be told, I actually met once an engineer that said that he wanted to leave the country, one of the countries that we just spoke about, because he's Black, and he told me, look, I don't feel welcome in this country. And he was not from that country, so he just moved to work there. And he said, and so I want to move to another country, like, let's say, Canada, where I think that I will belong, and here I don't feel like I belong here and I'm being welcome. And that's, for instance, one of the things that I really think that, sure, like, you know, diversity is awesome, but if people don't really feel like they belong, if there is not enough inclusion, you know, the numbers will go away, you know, as quick as we can build them. So I completely agree. That's a very good call. That's a very good call.
Yeah, and I need to ask something, because the other day, and since we're talking here about PT, women in tech, the other day I was scrolling through social media, and I got an advertisement about, took a look at this, a program course just for women. And I just saw this and I'm like, why just for women? Do I have different capabilities from men? What's happening here? Do you think this is the right approach? And Inês, you were just talking in the beginning that when you talk with child, you don't say, look, you should go to technology, this is good for women. And then I see these kinds of initiatives. This was not the Portuguese initiative, so, and I'm start thinking, is this the right approach? Start building content just for women? Because then I start having these feelings, and I'm like, I don't know if I feel good about this.
Yeah, I think from my own experience, usually, like, it's not the content that is different; it's like the communication that's different.
Yeah.
And from my own experience, usually that communication actually works. For some reason, when and I've seen that, for example, if you have a hackathon, 85 or 90% of the participants will be male, and only 10% of the participants will be female. But when we Portuguese Women in Tech did female hackathon, we got like hundreds of applications, and then women actually participate. So there's something about that. Something happens there. I don't know exactly what. Like, I'm not sure if Margarida has any studies about or knows about it. So I don't know exactly what happens. But like, sometimes target communication like that actually ends up attracting women for those programs. Maybe because we might actually feel more comfortable, or I don't know exactly what, but they do work. But that's not the goal, right? The goal is for us to have in a program. I'm not saying that it's going to be 50-50. I'm saying, like, sometimes it's 60-40, some other times is the opposite. So the goal is like for everyone to feel welcome and want to join the reskilling programs or hackathons or whatever. But I do see that target communication like that usually works to attract women for these programs. And so I think that's the reason why they do that. But sometimes, like, maybe in the beginning it's necessary to do that, and then later on things will change. But for example, if you look at the program, and then sometimes it's even like unconscious, like, so you look at the website of a reskilling program, and all the pictures you see are men. Like, by the end of it, you feel like, oh, maybe it might not be for me. And sometimes, again, it's unconscious. It's not something that you are making a conscious decision that this is not for me. It's something that those pictures are telling you. So sometimes if you make a conscious decision to, in this case, communicate only for women, that might help. But of course, that's not the long-term goal, right? This is like, the goal is for these programs to be diverse and attract diverse crowds.
Yeah, I did not come to a conclusion regarding that, but it's exactly how Inês is describing. So when you just communicate something to a female audience, they are there. But if you do not do so, you will end up with a male dominant environment. So it's very peculiar, and we should, maybe it's a challenge for this new year, to research a little bit more and to understand that effect.
No, absolutely. And it's interesting as well that I think that sometimes when we're talking about, kind of diversity and adding, different genders, different races to the work environment, obviously to society as well, of course, but to the work environment, it's interesting that sometimes people confuse that. We say, oh, we should all be equal. And even, for instance, myself, I back in the day, I thought about that. Say, look, we should all be the same. But actually, I think that diversity is completely the opposite, right? It's actually recognizing our differences and being okay with that and welcoming them, right? I remember that, I think it was, I don't know if it was Slack or so, that started with just the yellow emojis. And then all of a sudden people said, look, you shouldn't be colorblind, right? Like, let me express myself in the way that I think I should express myself. And they added, the skin tones and the emojis with the genders, exactly because of that. Like, diversity is not about saying, okay, so everyone is, kind of genderless. No, not that. Like, let's recognize our differences and be more interesting and more awesome because of that, and not just because we are just going to pretend that, that, like, okay, like everyone is this and that's it. What's your opinion on that?
I have a particular case for this. In the beginning, I said like, okay, so during my academic studies, I did not feel discriminated, and that was right. However, later in my life, I discovered that I suffer the effect in group, out group, and that is my male colleagues sometimes told me like, oh, for us, you are like a man. And this was like, for me at least at the time, I was like, okay, they are trying to say to me, like, you can be comfortable among us. And later in my life, I discovered that is like, I don't know how to translate it to English, but sexualization maybe. And so that is like an effect. So they only saw me as an equal if they saw me like a man, like in the in group. And that's exactly, I believe this is and it happened to me, so an example of that. So we should embrace the differences, and at least now I see each one of us like an individual, like it's not a female or a male, it's like an individual. And we all, exactly, the full package. And it's yeah, I believe that's the way to go.
Inês, anything that you would like to add to this?
No, I think like that's what we are seeing, right? I think like a lot of the times is yeah, I think we need to really will we welcome the whole person and not parts of the person, and I think that's where the inclusion part, right? A lot of times diversity is saying like, oh, we have 30% of female engineers in our company or in our organization, wherever. But the inclusion is like, how do people feel welcome in that organization? Do people really feel like they have all the like the context to actually thrive in that organization? There is an example that I really like from NASA, actually. So for a long time, women could not be astronauts. So the first classes of that NASA astronauts were only male, and then they start accepting women. And so for a long time, it's like mostly male until I think it was 2007, where for the first time the class was 50-50, so 50% male and 50% female. So this was the class, and it was like celebrated around the world. Everyone was very happy. And then a few years later, there was a time that for the first time ever, we will have a all-female spacewalk. So when astronauts are in the International Space Station, they go outside and this would be like the first whole female spacewalk. We are talking about two female astronauts that would be outside the International Space Station and walking in space. they were preparing for that, and then suddenly they realized that they only had one suit for a female astronaut. They didn't have two suits for female astronauts. And so they had to cancel the whole female astronaut spacewalk and have a male join the spacewalk with another female astronaut. And this is the part of the inclusion. So it was, the diversity was celebrated, but then they forgot that they actually didn't create the context. In this case, a very simple like spacesuit to be able to actually have a whole female spacewalk. And of course, this is such a small example. But these things happen every day, and happen in schools, happen in companies, happen in a lot of different spaces. And that's why I feel like the inclusion and the belonging part is super, super important. And we need to change and move the conversation there. Because if we want to keep attracting more women to technology, really need to show them that the industry welcomes them. It's not about the numbers, it's about really feeling inclusion or included, feeling that they belong there. And that's the big difference.
It's an amazing example. And just to build on top of what Margarida said, I also felt that, so you are not alone. I already had people told me that as well. So yeah, and it's curious to see how people try to, they probably they feel that they are doing the right thing. They are welcoming us, but
it's a compliment, right? It's a compliment.
Yeah, it seems like a compliment, and I'm like, yeah, you're
maybe
not. So maybe not. Well, this has been such a great talk, and you actually gave me some different perspectives here in some topics, because some time ago I even wrote an article saying I'm not a woman in tech, I'm a person in tech, even just because of some of the things that we talk about here. But yeah, it's really good to have this new perspective about how we should increase diversity and give inspiration for more women. Yeah, Pedro, what do you think of going into some final questions?
Yes, let's do that.
The special ones. So I'm going to start with the first one, and Pedro can go next. So the first one might sound a bit cliche, but feel free to choose anything that you like. So a favorite quote from yours. I don't know who wants to start sharing.
I can go ahead. So it's very hard for me to pick a favorite quote. There are so many that I enjoy. But I remember seeing this quote a long time ago, maybe 12 years ago or 15 years ago. And I really enjoyed it. First, because of the person that said, so this is a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. So Eleanor Roosevelt was the first lady. She was a US ambassador to the UN. She was responsible for creating the Human Rights Bill for the United Nations. And she said something like, great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. And I felt and she was very focused on big ideas. And I think it's a good reminder that about the importance of discussing big ideas and challenge ourselves with those big ideas. So that's my quote.
Wow, good one.
Yeah, so I have a lot of quotes, but related to this topic, I have one that I enjoy a lot, that is Daphnis Beethoven as a composer, because he no longer had society's soundtrack in his ears. So for me, I believe this transmits everything, right? When you maybe try to not hear what society say to you, you free yourself and you just do whatever you want. And I believe we should have a little bit of this spirit. So
very well. Last but not least, last question before we end the show is, we would like to invite Margarida to ask a question to Inês, and Inês to ask a question to Margarida. So now kind of let's change some roles. And so Margarida, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would like to know what are Inês' plans for this year, and if she is investing in a specific topic, or maybe what is your book list for this year, because I know you like to read a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for this year, in terms of Portuguese Women in Tech, we are going to keep on working on one hand, supporting women in technology. We know that we are going to do the mentorship program and the awards again. So this year, we want to keep on working with schools and really try to, as I was mentioning, really give kids and teachers and parents more information so they can make more informed decisions about their futures. So that's something that we want to do. I realized that I really like this. There's so many areas of the intersection of women and not only in tech, but also business and healthcare, for example. These are areas that I'm working on right now. And so that will be my focus for this year. We could basically spend the next few hours talking about all the things that we could change or need to address in these areas, sometimes with life-changing impacts. So that's something that I'm doing. In terms of books to read, I have many books. So this year, I usually have a goal of reading around 30 books, which I have been able to do. This year, I actually want to read less books, but more pages. So because there are a few books that I'm reading that are quite big. One of them is actually very interesting, called The Dream Machine. It's about building the computer, and it's about the impact of DARPA, so this defense agents in the US had on the creation of the internet and of the computer, and how and it's very interesting because I've read part of the book already, and the book is about, and it really shows how it's important. Diversity of backgrounds, diversity of ways of thinking were super important for the creation of the computer. There were a lot of psychologists actually working on the computer, on the first interfaces, and it's something that's actually very interesting to see the importance of having people with different backgrounds, different experiences coming to the workplace and really providing different perspectives that can make the work better. So that's what I'm going to be reading. So The Dream Machine, very interesting book. So now it's my turn to make my question. So I think my question is actually quite similar. So Margarida, what is the goal? What's your big goal for this year? That's a book that you want to read.
Okay.
So I changed of roles recently. So my goal for this year is to really invest in product management and my knowledge on that and so on. And as a personal topic, I want to invest in finance. So how to invest and so on. As a book, I did not decide yet, but I have a huge list of good reads. But maybe something of Marty Caden, because he's one of the big names in product management. So for sure, it will be in my read this year.
Cool. Thank you. This is that time of the year where it's always good to put some goals on the table and go after them. And thank you for sharing those. I hope these also inspire others and thank you for the references, maybe inspire others to also explore that topics also a bit more. Again, this was quite a conversation. We could be talking here for a long time, but we really need to end. So thank you everyone for watching as well. And let's wait for the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you all.